The July sun hung heavy over suburban Connecticut, the kind of oppressive heat that made the air shimmer above the asphalt and turned every breath into a labor. I stood at my backyard grill, sweat trickling down my temples as I flipped burgers and hot dogs for the 4th of July gathering. The smell of charcoal and sizzling meat mixed with the distant pop of fireworks from neighboring yards, creating that distinctly American symphony of independence and celebration. But there was nothing celebratory about the weight pressing down on my chest. My name is Robert Mitchell, and at 63 years old, I'd spent 4 decades working as a mechanic at Thompson's Auto Repair on Main Street. My hands were calloused, my back permanently bent from years of crawling under cars, and my savings account modest at best. I lived in the same 3-bedroom ranch house I'd bought with my late wife, Eleanor, back in 1985. A simple home with cream-colored siding, a maple tree in the front yard, and memories embedded in every wall. Today, that home felt more like a courtroom where I was perpetually on trial. "Dad, these burgers are burnt on one side," my son Ethan called out from the picnic table, his voice carrying that particular tone of condescension he'd perfected since graduating from Yale's business school. He sat there in his pressed khaki shorts and Ralph Lauren polo, his designer sunglasses reflecting my image back at me, a tired old man in a stained apron. Ethan was 35 now, a financial consultant at Mercer & Associates in Manhattan. Pulling in what he never let me forget was high 6 figures. He'd married Jessica 4 years ago, a corporate lawyer with a perpetual expression of barely concealed disdain for anyone earning less than $200,000 a year. Together, they'd produced 2 children, my grandchildren, who I barely knew because they were always too busy to visit, except for obligatory holidays like this one. "Sorry, son," I said, trying to keep my voice even as I scraped at the grill. "I'll get another batch going." "It's fine, Robert," Jessica interjected, pronouncing my name like it was a disease. She never called me Dad, never even tried. "We're watching our cholesterol anyway. Perhaps something grilled, but healthier, if that's not too much to ask." I felt the familiar burn of shame creeping up my neck. Around the picnic table sat not just my family but also the Hendersons from next door, Paul and Marie, who ran a successful real estate business, and the Chens from across the street, whose daughter had just been accepted to Harvard, all of them witnesses to my inadequacy. "I've got chicken breasts marinating inside," I offered, turning toward the house. "Just forget it, Dad," Ethan sighed dramatically. "We should have just gone to the club like Jessica suggested. At least there the food would be edible and we wouldn't have to sit in this backyard." He said backyard the way one might say landfill. I looked around at the space I'd maintained for decades, the grass I mowed every Saturday morning, the flower beds Eleanor had planted that I still tended, the wooden fence I'd repaired section by section over the years. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. It was home. "The country club would have been more appropriate for the children," Jessica added, fanning herself with a paper plate. "This heat is really quite unbearable, and there's no pool here. Madison and Chase are bored to tears." I glanced at my grandchildren. Madison, 9, was absorbed in her iPad, her fingers flying across the screen without ever looking up. Chase, 7, was kicking at the grass with his expensive sneakers, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. Neither had said more than hello to me when they arrived, hurried greetings delivered while looking at their screens. When was the last time I'd held them? When had they last asked me to tell them a story or play catch? The distance between us felt like miles, even though we sat in the same yard. "Kids," I called out, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. "Who wants to help Grandpa with the sparklers after dinner? We can light them up when it gets dark." Madison didn't even look up. Chase just shrugged. "They're not really into that primitive stuff anymore," Ethan said flatly. "Madison's more interested in coding camps and Chase is learning Mandarin. We're trying to give them actual skills for the modern world, you know? Not this." His hand gesture encompassed everything: the grill, the yard, me. I swallowed hard and returned to the burgers, my vision blurring slightly. The smoke from the grill stung my eyes, or at least that's what I told myself. Paul Henderson tried to ease the tension. "You know, Ethan, your dad's been the go-to mechanic in this town for as long as I can remember. Fixed my Buick last month when the dealer wanted to charge me $2,000. Robert did it for $300 and it runs like new." "That's nice," Ethan replied without looking up from his phone. "But we're talking about different worlds here, Paul. Blue-collar work is fine for some people, but it's not exactly a legacy to be proud of, is it?" The words landed like punches. Marie Henderson gasped softly. Even Jessica looked momentarily uncomfortable, though she quickly recovered and found something fascinating on her own phone. "Ethan," I said quietly, setting down my spatula. "That's enough." "Enough?" He finally looked up, and I saw something cold in his eyes that I'd never noticed before, or perhaps had refused to see. "Enough? Dad, I'm just being honest. You're 63 years old and you're still working at the same garage you started at when you were 23. Same job, same house, same everything. You never grew, never evolved, never wanted anything more. Your father worked hard to—" Paul started, but Ethan cut him off. "To what? To stay exactly where he was? To make sure I grew up in this mediocre little bubble where the biggest excitement was Friday night high school football?" Ethan stood up now, and I realized he'd been drinking. Not drunk, but emboldened by alcohol. "Do you know what it was like having to explain to my classmates at Yale that my dad was a mechanic? Do you know the embarrassment?" "Ethan, please," I whispered, feeling the stares of everyone in the yard. "I'm successful despite you, not because of you," he continued, his voice rising. "Jessica and we're building something real, something that matters. We have a 6-bedroom house in Westchester. The kids go to private school. We're members at the country club. We made something of ourselves. And every time I come back here to this monument to mediocrity, I'm reminded of everything I had to overcome." Jessica placed a hand on his arm, but her expression suggested she agreed with every word. The Hendersons and the Chens sat frozen, uncomfortable witnesses to a family implosion. Someone's firework went off in the distance, a hollow boom that echoed the emptiness expanding in my chest. "You think you're so noble, don't you?" Ethan pressed on, stepping closer to me. "The humble mechanic, the simple man, the good neighbor. But you know what you really are, Dad. You're a failure. A failure who never wanted more, never tried harder, never gave me a real example of what success looks like. Everything I am, I built myself, from nothing, because you gave me nothing worth keeping." The word failure hung in the air like smoke. I saw Paul look away. Marie's hand covered her mouth. The Chen's teenage daughter, Lucy, stared at her lap. My grandchildren, still absorbed in their devices, were oblivious to the carnage of words. I stood there at my grill, in my stained apron, in my modest backyard, and felt something inside me crack. Not break. I'd been through too much in life to break from words alone. But crack. A fracture that would either heal stronger or shatter completely. "I think maybe you should go," I said quietly, each word an effort. "Oh, we're going," Ethan said, already gesturing for Jessica to gather the kids. "We only came because Mom would have wanted us to keep up appearances. But she's gone, Dad. She's been gone for 3 years. And without her here to play happy family, there's really no point, is there?" He invoked Eleanor's name like a weapon, knowing it would cut deepest. My wife, who'd died of cancer after a 2-year battle, who'd made me promise to keep the family together, to love our son no matter what, to always keep the door open. Eleanor, who'd believed family was everything. "Madison, Chase, let's go," Jessica commanded, her heels clicking on the patio stones I'd laid myself 15 years ago. "Say goodbye to your grandfather." "Bye," they mumbled in unison, still not looking up. I watched them pile into Ethan's black BMW X7, a vehicle worth more than I'd earn in 3 years. Through the tinted windows, I could see Ethan saying something to Jessica, both of them laughing. About me, probably. About the pathetic old man and his pathetic little life. The Hendersons left shortly after with awkward apologies. The Chens followed, their sympathy evident, but their discomfort stronger. Soon, I stood alone in my backyard, the grill still smoking, plates of uneaten food covering the picnic table, and the distant sound of fireworks celebrating a freedom I didn't feel. I turned off the grill and walked into my house, the house I'd bought with Eleanor, where we'd brought Ethan home from the hospital, where we'd celebrated every Christmas and birthday, where Eleanor had died in our bedroom with her hand in mine. The house that Ethan called mediocre. In the living room, I sank into my worn recliner, Eleanor's Father's Day gift to me in 1998, and stared at the wall of family photos. There I was, younger and stronger, holding infant Ethan at the hospital. There we were at his kindergarten graduation, his little hand in mine. His middle school science fair, where his volcano project had won first place, and he'd thrown his arms around me, shouting, "We did it, Dad!" His high school graduation, where he'd thanked me in his speech for teaching him the value of hard work. When had it all gone wrong? When had I become the embarrassment instead of the hero? My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Sorry about today. Ethan was out of line. Paul. Another buzz. You've always been a good neighbor and a good man. Don't let anyone tell you different. Marie. Their kindness hurt worse than Ethan's cruelty somehow. Pity from neighbors while my own son felt nothing but contempt. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water from the tap. No fancy filtered system, just regular Connecticut water. Through the window above the sink, I could see the maple tree in the front yard, the one Eleanor and I had planted as a sapling when we first moved in. It was massive now, its branches reaching toward the darkening sky like arms spread wide in embrace or surrender. What would you tell me to do, Ellie? I whispered to the empty kitchen. How do I reach him? How do I make him see? But Eleanor wasn't here to answer. She'd been gone for 3 years, 2 months, and 17 days. Not that I was counting. I thought about the years of raising Ethan alone after she died, how I'd tried to be there for him even as he pulled away, even as his visits became shorter and his calls less frequent, how I'd convinced myself it was natural. He was busy building his career, starting his family, making his way in the world, how I'd ignored the signs that his embarrassment about his origins was curdling into something uglier. My phone rang, startling me from my thoughts. For a brief, stupid moment, I hoped it was Ethan calling to apologize. But the screen showed Thompson's Auto, my boss, probably calling about a Monday morning job. I let it go to voicemail. Tomorrow's problems could wait for tomorrow. Instead, I climbed the stairs to the second floor, my knees aching with each step, the legacy of 40 years of crouching under cars and lifting heavy parts. I passed Ethan's old bedroom, which I'd kept exactly as he'd left it when he went to college. His high school football trophies on the shelf, his Yale acceptance letter framed on the wall, his old comic book collection in boxes under the bed, a shrine to a son who thought I was a failure. In my own bedroom, I changed out of my stained clothes and sat on the edge of the bed Eleanor and I had shared for 38 years. On her nightstand, I kept a photo of us on our wedding day. 2 kids from working-class families believing that love and hard work were enough to build a good life. We'd been so naive, so hopeful. So wrong, apparently. I tried, Ellie, I said to her photograph. I gave him everything I could. It wasn't fancy, but it was honest. It was real. Why wasn't that enough? Outside my window, fireworks exploded in bursts of red, white, and blue. America celebrating its independence while I felt more trapped than ever. Trapped in a life my son despised. Trapped in a body that was wearing out. Trapped in a role that no longer seemed to matter to anyone. I lay back on the bed and closed my eyes. But sleep wouldn't come. Instead, memories played like a movie I couldn't turn off. I must have dozed off eventually because I woke to the gray light of dawn filtering through the bedroom curtains. Sunday morning. The day after Independence Day. The day after my son declared independence from any respect for me. My back ached as I sat up. It always did these days. A reminder that 63 wasn't 63 for everyone. For a man who'd spent 4 decades bending over engines, 63 felt more like 80. I took my time getting dressed, pulling on jeans that were starting to hang loose on my frame and a faded flannel shirt Eleanor had bought me from L.L. Bean 10 years ago. She'd always loved how I looked in flannel. Downstairs, the kitchen was exactly as I'd left it. Dishes in the sink, uneaten food wrapped on the counter, the smell of yesterday's smoke still clinging to everything. I made coffee in the old Mr. Coffee machine we'd received as a wedding gift in 1982. Watching the dark liquid drip into the pot with hypnotic slowness. While it brewed, I stood at the kitchen window and watched the neighborhood wake up. Paul Henderson emerged from his front door in jogging clothes, waving when he saw me at the window. I waved back, grateful he didn't come over. I wasn't ready for concerned neighbor conversations yet. The coffee tasted bitter, or maybe that was just my mood. I carried my mug out to the front porch and sat in the weathered rocking chair I'd built from a kit 20 years ago. One of the few projects I'd tackled that wasn't just fixing what was broken. The wood was soft now, worn smooth by years of Eleanor and me sitting here on summer evenings, watching the neighborhood and talking about everything and nothing. A car drove past, then another. The Chen's teenage daughter Lucy left for what looked like an early morning tennis lesson. The world kept moving forward while I felt stuck in place. Exactly where Ethan accused me of being. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, hope flaring stupidly again, but it was just a spam call about my car's extended warranty. I almost laughed at the irony. I was a mechanic who could keep a car running forever without any warranty. But who was going to fix me? I spent the morning cleaning up from yesterday's disaster. I scraped the grill, bagged the uneaten food, washed the dishes, folded the lawn chairs. Physical work had always been my meditation, my way of processing difficult thoughts. My hands knew what to do even when my mind was scattered. By noon, the house was back to its usual state of quiet order. Too quiet. Before Eleanor died, the house had been filled with sounds. Her humming while she cooked, the television on low in the evening, her voice calling me from another room. After she passed, I'd gotten used to the silence, or thought I had. But today it felt oppressive, like the walls themselves were judging my failure. Failure. The word kept echoing in my head in Ethan's voice. I found myself in the garage, surrounded by tools and parts and the comfortable smell of oil and metal. This had always been my sanctuary, the place where problems had clear solutions. A broken alternator? Replace it. A worn timing belt? Install a new one. A father-son relationship destroyed by contempt and disappointment? There wasn't a tool for that. On the workbench sat a project I'd started 3 months ago, rebuilding a carburetor for Mrs. Peterson's 1967 Mustang. She was 92, and that car had been her husband's pride and joy before he passed. She couldn't afford to take it to a specialist, so I'd offered to do the work for free, just for parts. It was the kind of thing I did regularly, the kind of thing that made me happy even though it didn't make me money, the kind of thing Ethan would call a waste of time. I picked up a wrench and got to work, losing myself in the familiar rhythms of disassembly and cleaning. My hands moved with the confidence of 40 years of practice, knowing exactly how much pressure to apply, which parts were fragile, where the hidden screws were located. This was something I was good at. This was something that mattered, even if my son couldn't see it. Hours passed. The sun moved across the sky, visible through the garage's high window. I worked until my back demanded a break, then stood and stretched, feeling vertebrae pop and muscles protest. Through the open garage door, I could see the street, the houses of neighbors who'd known me for decades, who'd trusted me with their vehicles and their problems. Was I really a failure because I'd never left this town? Because I'd never wanted a bigger house or a fancier car or a more impressive job title? Because I'd found satisfaction in honest work and simple pleasures? Eleanor had never thought so. She'd been proud of me, proud of the life we'd built together. We'd raised Ethan to value hard work and integrity and kindness, or at least we'd tried to. Somewhere along the way, maybe at Yale, maybe in New York, maybe when he met Jessica, those values had been replaced by others. Money, status, image, the kind of things that looked good from the outside but felt hollow up close. I thought about Ethan's words yesterday. Everything I am, I built myself, from nothing. From nothing. The memories came flooding back, uninvited but insistent. I remembered Ethan at 16, desperate to take his girlfriend to homecoming but with a car that wouldn't start. I'd worked until 2 in the morning in this very garage, replacing a failed fuel pump because I wanted him to have that night, that memory, that moment of teenage normalcy. When I'd handed him the keys at 6 a.m., he'd hugged me so tight I could barely breathe and said, "You're the best dad in the world." I remembered Ethan at 13, struggling with algebra and convinced he was stupid. Eleanor and I had hired a tutor, $40 an hour we couldn't really afford, and I'd picked up extra shifts at the garage to pay for it. By the end of the semester, he'd gotten an A. He'd never known about the extra shifts, never known that I'd worked 70-hour weeks for 2 months. He'd just known that he wasn't stupid after all. I remembered Ethan at 8, begging for a Nintendo like his friends had. Christmas morning, there it was under the tree, wrapped in paper. Eleanor and I had stayed up late decorating with hand-drawn pictures. I'd put 150 miles on the Civic, driving to 5 different stores to find it in stock. His face when he opened it, the pure joy and excitement, had been worth every mile. I remembered Ethan at 4, scared of the dark, needing me to sit with him until he fell asleep. Every single night for 6 months, I sat in that chair in his room, sometimes dozing off myself, sometimes just watching him breathe, feeling the overwhelming weight of love and responsibility that comes with being a father. I remembered Eleanor 8 months pregnant, hormones making her crave a specific kind of pizza from a shop 30 miles away at 10 o'clock at night. I'd driven through a snowstorm to get it because I would have done anything, to make her happy. I remembered the day Eleanor was diagnosed with cancer, the way my world had tilted on its axis, the way I'd held Ethan, who was 32 then, while he sobbed in my arms, how I'd promised him we'd get through it together, how I'd taken unpaid leave from the garage to be with Eleanor during her treatment, depleting our savings to keep us afloat, never complaining because what else was I going to do? She was my wife. He was my son. You do what needs doing. From nothing. He'd built his success from nothing. The anger that had been simmering finally boiled over. I slammed the wrench down on the workbench, the clang echoing through the garage. Who did he think paid for his Yale education? Who covered what the scholarships didn't? Who sent him money in college when he was broke because he'd spent his allowance on dinners with friends? Who co-signed his first apartment lease in New York because his credit wasn't established? Who gave him $5,000 toward his wedding because Jessica's parents made it clear they expected equal contributions from both families, and Ethan was too proud to admit he couldn't match their wealth? Who showed up at his graduation, his wedding, the births of his children, always proud, always supportive, never asking for recognition or gratitude, because that's not why you do those things. I'd done all of it. Me, the failure, the man who never wanted more, never tried harder, never gave him a real example of success. My phone rang, and this time I didn't feel any hope. I looked at the screen. Ethan. For a long moment I stared at his name. Part of me wanted to answer, desperate for any connection with my son, even if it meant enduring more contempt. Part of me wanted to throw the phone against the garage wall and watch it shatter. Instead, I let it ring until it went to voicemail. 30 seconds later, a notification. Voicemail from Ethan. I didn't listen to it. Whatever he had to say, I wasn't ready to hear it yet. The rest of Sunday passed in a blur of forced activity. I mowed the lawn even though it didn't need it. I cleaned gutters that were already clean. I organized the garage, categorizing tools and parts with an obsessive precision that would have made Eleanor laugh. She'd always teased me about my need to fix things, to keep my hands busy, to avoid sitting still with my thoughts. Robert Mitchell, she'd say in that affectionate, exasperated tone, you're going to organize yourself into an early grave. Come sit with me. The gutters can wait. But Eleanor wasn't here to tell me to stop, to pull me back to the present, to remind me that some things couldn't be fixed with a wrench and determination. By the time evening fell, I was exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with physical work. I made a sandwich I didn't want, sat in front of the television watching a baseball game I didn't care about, and tried not to think about the voicemail waiting on my phone. At 10 o'clock, I finally caved. I opened the voicemail app and pressed play. Dad, it's me. Ethan's voice, irritated rather than apologetic. Look, Jessica reminded me that we still need the title to the Civic. We're planning to sell it, and we need the paperwork. Can you dig that up? Also, Madison's birthday is coming up, and she specifically asked not to have the party at the house because, it's not really appropriate for her friends. We'll do something at the club. I'll send details. Okay. Talk later. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of yesterday. Just demands for paperwork and a casual dismissal of my home as not appropriate for a 9-year-old's birthday party. The Civic he mentioned was a 1998 Honda I'd bought used when Ethan was 12. It had been his first car, the one I'd taught him to drive in, the one he'd driven to prom and to college for his freshman year. When he'd upgraded to something newer, I'd held onto it for sentimental reasons, keeping it maintained and registered just in case. Now he wanted to sell it, probably worth $1,500 at most, but that wasn't the point. It was another connection severed, another piece of our shared history that he considered disposable. I deleted the voicemail without responding. That night, lying in bed, I thought about what Paul Henderson had said. Don't let anyone tell you different. The problem was, the person telling me I was a failure wasn't just anyone. It was my son, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd helped shape, the person whose opinion mattered more than anyone else's in the world except Eleanor's. And Eleanor was gone. Monday morning arrived too soon and too slowly at the same time. I dragged myself out of bed, muscles protesting every movement, and got ready for work. The garage didn't care about my personal crisis. Cars needed fixing, customers needed help, and I needed the distraction. Thompson's Auto Repair occupied a squat brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between a diner and a laundromat. I'd been working there since I was 23, first as a junior mechanic, then as senior mechanic, finally, as the most experienced guy in the shop. Old man Thompson had retired 10 years ago, selling the business to his grandson, Derek, who was 42, and ran things with efficient competence if not his grandfather's warmth. I parked my truck, a 2003 Ford F-150 with 200,000 miles on it, that ran like a dream because I kept it maintained, and walked into the shop. The familiar smell of motor oil and tire rubber hit me like a comfortable embrace. "Morning, Robert," Derek called from the front desk. "Got a transmission job on Bay 3 that's all yours. Should be straightforward." "Morning," I replied, grabbing my coveralls from the hook and pulling them on. The fabric was worn soft from years of washings, stained with permanent reminders of jobs past. I looked at my reflection in the small mirror by the lockers. Graying hair, lined face, tired eyes. A mechanic. A failure, according to my son. I got to work on the transmission, sliding under the Chevy Silverado with practiced ease despite my protesting back. Under the vehicle, in the familiar semi-darkness, surrounded by metal and purpose, I felt a small measure of peace. This was who I was. This was what I did. And despite what Ethan thought, it mattered. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. It helped people. Mrs. Patterson could keep her late husband's car running. Young couples could afford to fix their vehicles instead of going into debt for new ones. Families could trust that their cars were safe for their kids. Maybe that was enough. Maybe it had to be. But even as I thought it, I felt the ache of wanting my son to understand, to see, to remember who I'd been to him before I became someone to be ashamed of. The day wore on. I fixed the transmission. I replaced a timing belt. I diagnosed a mysterious noise that turned out to be a loose heat shield. Normal problems with normal solutions, if only family worked the same way. At lunch, I sat in my truck eating a sandwich from home and staring at my phone. 2 texts from Ethan. "Did you get my voicemail?" And "Dad, need that title ASAP." I typed and deleted several responses before settling on. "Been busy, we'll look for it." His reply came instantly. "Thanks. BTW, Jessica's parents want to have you over for dinner Friday. I guess they felt bad about Saturday. Can you make it? Dinner with Jessica's parents, the Sinclairs." Edward was a corporate attorney. Linda was on the boards of 3 charities. They lived in a house in Greenwich that had been featured in Connecticut magazine. They drove matching Mercedes. They absolutely thoroughly belonged to a different world than me. The few times I'd interacted with them, their politeness had been glacial, their smiles tight. They'd made it abundantly clear that while they tolerated me because I was Ethan's father, they considered me an unfortunate reminder of his humble origins. "I'll pass, thanks." I texted back. "Dad, don't be difficult. It's just dinner." Said I'll pass. Have a good week. I turned my phone off and went back to work, taking satisfaction in the only place I could seem to find it anymore. In the honest labor of my hands, in the straightforward problems of machines, in the simple truth that broken things could be fixed, if only that applied to everything. 2 weeks passed in an uncomfortable stalemate. Ethan texted occasionally with demands for paperwork or information, each message more irritated than the last. I responded minimally, providing what was necessary and nothing more. He never mentioned the 4th of July. No apology came. It was as if he believed his words had been justified, just an uncomfortable truth finally spoken aloud. Madison's birthday party happened without me. I'd sent a gift card. Impersonal but practical, exactly what Ethan seemed to prefer. No thank you call came from Madison. No photos were shared. I existed in my grandchildren's lives as a distant obligation, nothing more. Work provided routine and purpose. I rebuilt Mrs. Peterson's carburetor and drove the Mustang to her retirement home, watching her face light up with joy and memories. I spent a Saturday helping young Marcus Thompson, Derek's nephew, just 18, learn basic engine maintenance because no one else would take the time. I fixed a single mother's brakes for half price because she was crying in the waiting room about how she couldn't afford them but couldn't afford not to have them either. These moments mattered, even if Ethan couldn't see their value. They were what Eleanor used to call the measure of a man. Not what you accumulated, but what you gave. Not what you gained, but whom you helped. It was a Wednesday afternoon in late July when everything changed. I was under a Honda Accord replacing a leaking oil pan when Derek called out, "Robert, phone call for you. Says it's important." I rolled out from under the car, wiping my hands on a rag. "Who is it?" "Guy named William Ashford. Says he's an attorney." My stomach dropped. Attorneys never brought good news. Had something happened to Ethan? To the kids. I grabbed the phone with greasy fingers, my heart pounding. This is Robert Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell, I'm William Ashford from Ashford and Associates here in Hartford. The voice was cultured, professional, probably about my age. I apologize for calling you at work, but I tried your home number several times with no success. What's this about? I asked, bracing for bad news. Actually, it's about property records. I'm conducting title searches for a development company interested in purchasing several properties in your neighborhood. During my research, I came across some interesting information regarding your property at 247 Maple Street. I frowned. My house? It's not for sale. I understand that, Mr. Mitchell, but the matter is somewhat complex. Are you aware that according to the land records at the town clerk's office, you are the sole legal owner of the property with no co-owners, beneficiaries, or transfer on death provisions? Of course I'm the sole owner. My wife passed away 3 years ago. It was our house, but now it's mine. Yes, but... He paused, and I heard papers shuffling. Mr. Mitchell, were you aware that you never added your son, Ethan Mitchell, to the deed, and that there's no will on file that would transfer the property to him upon your death? I blinked, confused. Why would I have added him to the deed? He's got his own house. This is my house. I see. More paper shuffling. And the property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the maintenance, you handle all of that yourself. Of course I do. It's my house. There was a long pause. Mr. Mitchell, I think there may be a significant misunderstanding in your family about property ownership. Does your son believe he has any legal claim to this house? I don't know what Ethan believes, I said, irritation creeping into my voice. What's this really about, Mr. Ashford? I'm calling because in my title search I found several concerning documents that someone, and I'm not accusing anyone specifically, attempted to file with the town clerk's office. These documents purported to transfer ownership of your property through a quitclaim deed and power of attorney. However, they were rejected because your signature was never notarized, which is legally required. My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? I never signed any quitclaim deed. I suspected as much. Mr. Mitchell, I need to be blunt with you. Someone tried to transfer ownership of your house without proper documentation. The clerk rejected the filing, but the attempt was made. Given that these documents named your son as the beneficiary, I felt obligated to inform you. This could constitute attempted fraud. I leaned against the workbench, my legs suddenly weak. Ethan tried to take my house? I can't prove who filed the documents without an investigation, but yes, someone attempted to transfer your property to Ethan Mitchell without proper legal authority. I'm calling not just as a courtesy, but because I believe you should secure your property immediately. File a new deed with updated provisions, create a proper will, and possibly consult with law enforcement if you believe this was done without your knowledge. I need to see these documents, I said, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I can provide copies. When could you come to my office? Today, I said immediately. I'll come today. I'll be here until 6. 145 Trumbull Street, Suite 400. I ended the call and stood there in the garage, oil-stained and trembling. Around me, the normal sounds of the shop continued. Air compressors hissing, impact wrenches buzzing, Derek talking to a customer. But I felt like I was underwater, everything muted and distant. Ethan had tried to steal my house, not inherit it, not receive it as a gift. Steal it. You okay, Robert? Derek appeared beside me, concern on his face. You look like you've seen a ghost. I need to take the rest of the day off, I managed. Family emergency. Of course, man. Go. Whatever you need. I changed out of my coveralls in a daze, pulled on my regular clothes, and walked to my truck. The drive to Hartford took 40 minutes, but I barely remembered it. My mind kept replaying the attorney's words, kept trying to reconcile them with the son I thought I knew. This couldn't be right. Ethan was arrogant, yes. Embarrassed by me, clearly. But a thief? A fraud? That was something else entirely. Ashford and Associates occupied a floor in a modern glass building downtown. William Ashford turned out to be exactly as I'd imagined. 60 years old, gray hair, expensive suit, kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He shook my hand firmly and gestured to a chair in his tastefully decorated office. Mr. Mitchell, thank you for coming so quickly. I have the documents here. He slid a folder across his mahogany desk. I opened it with shaking hands. There, on official-looking forms, was my signature, or a very good approximation of it. on a quitclaim deed transferring all interest in 247 Maple Street to Ethan Mitchell. The date was from 2 months ago. There was also a power of attorney document, again with my forged signature, giving Ethan authority to conduct property transactions on my behalf. "This isn't my signature," I said, my voice rough. "It's close, but it's not mine." The town clerk suspected as much, which is why she required notarization before she'd file it. When no notary seal appeared on the revised documents, she rejected the whole thing and flagged it in the system. That's how I found it during my title search. "Can I keep these copies?" "Those are yours." "Mr. Mitchell, I need to advise you to take several immediate steps. First, file a police report for attempted fraud. Second, secure your property with a new deed that explicitly names beneficiaries and prevents unauthorized transfers. Third, create a proper will with an attorney you trust. And fourth," he paused, his expression sympathetic, "consider whether you want your son to have access to your personal documents." I sat back in the chair, the papers weighing heavy in my hands. "Why are you doing this? Helping me?" Ashford smiled sadly. "My father was a mechanic. Best man I ever knew. When he died, my brother tried to contest the will, claiming Dad wasn't of sound mind when he signed it. Tried to take everything from my mother. I spent 2 years fighting him in court. Family property disputes are ugly, Mr. Mitchell. I'd rather help you prevent one than profit from representing you in one." "Thank you," I said, and I meant it. He gave me referrals to a criminal attorney and an estate planning attorney, both of whom he assured me were honest and affordable. We shook hands again, and I left his office carrying proof that my son had tried to steal from me. I sat in my truck in the parking garage for 20 minutes, just staring at the documents. The signature was good. Whoever had forged it had practiced, had studied my handwriting. But there were small differences. The way I looped my R, the angle of my M. Small things, but telling. Had Ethan done this himself? Or had he hired someone? And why? He had money, success, everything he claimed to have built from nothing. Why did he need my modest house? Unless it wasn't about need. Unless it was about erasing me entirely, taking the last thing I had, the last connection to Eleanor, the last piece of our shared history. Or maybe it was even simpler than that. Maybe he just saw an asset going to waste, tied up with a father he considered a failure, and decided to claim it early, like collecting an inheritance before the death, except without the courtesy of waiting. I drove home on autopilot, parked in my driveway, and walked into the house that was apparently worth stealing. I looked at it with new eyes. The hardwood floors Eleanor and I had refinished ourselves, the kitchen we'd remodeled in 1995, the bathroom where I'd retiled the shower 3 years ago. The walls held framed photos of our life. Wedding pictures, baby pictures, family vacations to Cape Cod and the Berkshires, Ethan's school photos from kindergarten through high school. A life built on love and sacrifice and honest work. A life Ethan wanted to erase. I pulled out my phone and called him. He answered on the third ring, his voice distracted. "Dad, kinda busy right now. Did you try to steal my house?" Silence. Then, "What are you talking about?" "A quitclaim deed, a power of attorney, both with forged signatures, filed with the town clerk 2 months ago." "What am I talking about, Ethan?" More silence. I could hear his breathing, could imagine him calculating his response. "Dad, I can explain." "So you did do it. It's not stealing if it's going to be mine anyway." His voice rose defensively. "You're 63. You still work a manual labor job. You have no retirement savings worth mentioning. That house is the only real asset you have, and you're just sitting on it, letting it depreciate, when I could be using it productively." "Using it how?" "You have your own house. As an investment property. Or I could sell it and actually get some value from it." "Dad, you're being irrational. That house should be generating income, not just existing. I was trying to help you. By forging my signature? By trying to steal it without telling me?" "It's not stealing," he shouted. "You're going to die eventually, and then it'll be tied up in probate for months, losing value, when we could handle this cleanly now. I was doing you a favor." I sat down heavily on the couch, the phone pressed to my ear. "A favor? You were doing me a favor by committing fraud." "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's a legal technicality. The house should be mine anyway. Because you're my son? Because you think you deserve it? Because you don't need it? Because I can actually do something useful with it instead of letting it rot in this dead-end town. This is my home, Ethan. Mine and your mother's. Every room has memories. Mom's dead, Dad. She's gone. And clinging to some shrine to her isn't healthy. It's time to move on, to be practical about assets and planning. God, this is exactly why you've never gotten anywhere in life. You're too sentimental about things that don't matter. Something in me shifted. Not broke. I thought I was broken after the 4th of July, but I was wrong. This was something different. This was a clarity I hadn't felt in years, a cold understanding that settled over me like armor. You're right, I said quietly. I am sentimental. I kept every birthday card you made me in elementary school. I saved your baby teeth in a little box. I have your first baseball glove in the attic. I kept your room exactly as you left it because some part of me hoped you'd come back. Really come back. Not just visit out of obligation. I kept this house because it's where we were a family, where your mother lived and loved and died, where I taught you to tie your shoes and ride a bike and be a good person, or at least where I tried to. Dad, but you're also wrong. The house does matter. Not because it's an investment or an asset, because it's mine. I earned it. I paid for it. I maintained it. And most importantly, it's not yours. Not yet. Not until I decide it is, if I ever decide it is. You're being ridiculous. I'm being robbed. By my own son. There's a legal term for what you tried to do, Ethan. Fraud. Forgery. Theft. Want to know how I found out? An attorney called me. He was doing a title search and found your forged documents. He advised me to file a police report. The silence on the other end was profound. You wouldn't, Ethan finally said, but his voice had lost its certainty. Why not? You were willing to steal from me. Why shouldn't I be willing to report a crime? I'm your son, and I'm your father. The father you called a failure in front of my neighbors. The father whose house you tried to steal. The father you're so embarrassed by that you won't let your children spend time with me. Why exactly should I protect you? Because, he struggled, and I could hear something that might have been panic. Because we're family. Family, I repeated. Is that what we are? Because for the last few years I've felt more like an obligation you resent. A reminder of humble origins you'd rather forget. A failure you tolerate out of duty. I never said. You said exactly that. On the 4th of July. In my backyard. In front of people I've known for 40 years. You said I was a failure who gave you nothing worth keeping. Those were your exact words, Ethan. I remember them perfectly because they've been playing in my head every day since. I was drunk. I was upset about work stuff. I didn't mean. Yes, you did. Drunk words are sober thoughts. You meant every word. And you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe by your standards. The Yale education, the 6-figure salary, the country club membership. I am a failure. But I'm a failure who never stole from his family. I'm a failure who never forged anyone's signature. I'm a failure who worked 3 jobs to pay for your college applications, who drove through a snowstorm to bring your mother pizza when she was pregnant with you, who sat with you every night when you were scared of the dark, who taught you to throw a curveball and change a tire and treat people with respect. I paused, my throat tight. Or at least I tried to teach you that last one. Clearly, I failed at that too. Dad, please, let's talk about this rationally. I am being rational. For the first time in months, maybe years, I'm seeing things clearly. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave me alone. No more demands for paperwork. No more texts about what I should do or where I should go. No more expectations that I'll play the grateful old man while you treat me like garbage. And you're going to hope, really, sincerely hope, that I decide not to press charges. You can't seriously. I have the forged documents, Ethan. I have proof. An attorney has already documented everything. Whether I report this or not depends entirely on whether you can demonstrate even a shred of the decency I tried to raise you with. This is insane. Over a house? You'd destroy your relationship with your son, with your grandchildren, over a house? You're the one who tried to steal it, I shouted, finally losing my carefully maintained control. You destroyed this relationship, not me. You called me a failure. You tried to forge my signature. You treated me like an obstacle to overcome instead of the father who gave you everything. I was standing now, pacing the living room, years of suppressed emotion pouring out. Do you know what I did for you? Do you have any idea? When you were 8 and wanted that Nintendo, I worked double shifts for 3 months to afford it. When you needed a tutor, I worked 70 hours a week to pay for it. When you went to Yale, I took out a second mortgage on this house, the house you tried to steal. to cover what the scholarships didn't. When your car broke down sophomore year, I drove 6 hours to New Haven and fixed it in the parking lot of your dorm because you couldn't afford to miss class, and I couldn't afford a tow truck. My voice cracked. When your mother was dying, and you called me crying, I held you. I promised you we'd get through it together. I spent every penny I'd saved for retirement on her medical bills because I would have done anything, to give her one more day. And when she died, I kept going because that's what you do. You keep going. For your family, for your son, even when your son thinks you're a failure. Ethan said nothing. I could hear his breathing, ragged and uneven. That house you tried to steal? I bought it with money I earned fixing cars for 40 years. Your mother picked out the wallpaper in the dining room. We painted every room together. We planted that maple tree in the front yard the day we moved in. She died in the bedroom, holding my hand, making me promise to keep living, to keep being there for you. And you tried to take it, to turn it into an investment property or sell it for cash, to erase everything it represents. I wiped at my eyes, angry at myself for crying, angrier at him for making me feel this way. So no, Ethan, this isn't about a house. This is about respect, about honesty, about whether you have any concept of what you've tried to destroy. I'm sorry, he said finally, and his voice sounded strange, smaller, uncertain. Dad, I'm sorry. I thought I was being smart, practical. Jessica's father said I should secure my inheritance before it got complicated, that old people sometimes change their minds or get confused, and I thought I was protecting our future by stealing from me. I didn't think of it as stealing. I thought of it as planning ahead. But I see now that I was wrong. I was so wrong. And the things I said on the 4th of July, I can't take those back. But I want you to know that I was angry about other things, and I took it out on you, and that wasn't fair. It sounded like an apology. It had the words of an apology. But something about it felt hollow, rehearsed, like he was trying to diffuse a situation rather than genuinely seeking forgiveness. I need time, I said. I need to think about all of this, about whether I can trust you, about whether we have anything left to salvage. Of course, I understand. Take all the time you need. And Dad, I really am sorry. Are you sorry you did it or sorry you got caught? He didn't answer that question. After a long pause, he said, I'll call you in a few days, okay? We can talk more then. Don't, I said. I'll call you when I'm ready, if I'm ever ready. I hung up before he could respond. The house felt different now, not like a shrine or a burden or an asset. It felt like a battlefield, and I'd just won the first skirmish in a war I'd never wanted to fight. I made myself dinner, scrambled eggs and toast, and ate without tasting anything. Then I sat on the couch and stared at the wall of family photos, seeing them differently now. That little boy with the missing front teeth who I'd carried on my shoulders. That teenager with the football trophy who I'd cheered for at every game. That college graduate in the cap and gown who'd thanked me in his speech. Where had he gone? When had he been replaced by this stranger who saw me as an obstacle, an embarrassment, a resource to be exploited? Or had he always been there, and I'd just refused to see it? My phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Mr. Mitchell, this is William Ashford. I wanted to follow up on our meeting today. Have you had a chance to consider your next steps? I'm happy to provide any additional guidance you might need. I stared at the message, thinking about police reports and fraud charges and the complete destruction of what was left of my relationship with my son. Then I thought about forged signatures and stolen homes and the word failure spoken with contempt. Thank you, I typed back. I've confronted my son. He admitted to the forgery. I'm going to secure my property as you advised, but I'm not sure yet about pressing charges. I need time to think. His response came quickly. Understood. Whatever you decide, make sure you protect yourself. Family loyalty is admirable, but not at the expense of your security and dignity. My door is always open if you need advice. Dignity. That word again. It seemed to be the theme of my life lately, trying to maintain it in the face of people determined to strip it away. I spent the evening making phone calls. First, to the estate planning attorney Ashford had recommended, scheduling an appointment for Friday to create a proper will and secure my property. Second, to my bank, putting a freeze on any large transactions and ensuring no one else could access my accounts. Third, to the town clerk's office, filing a formal statement that I had not authorized any property transfers and requesting immediate notification of any future attempts. By the time I finished, it was after midnight. I was exhausted but couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's face. Not the man he was now, but the boy he'd been. The child who'd trusted me completely. The teenager who'd still sought my advice. The young man who'd hugged me at his college graduation and whispered, "Thanks for believing in me, Dad." What had I missed? Where had I failed? Because despite everything, despite the evidence of his betrayal, I still felt like somehow this was my fault. That I'd raised him wrong, taught him wrong, been the wrong example. Eleanor would know what to do. She'd always been better at understanding Ethan, at seeing beneath his surface to what he really needed. But Eleanor was gone, and I was alone, trying to navigate a situation I never imagined facing. I fell asleep finally around 3 a.m., still dressed, still on the couch, surrounded by photos of a family that no longer existed except in memory and regret. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange limbo. I went to work, fixed cars, came home to an empty house, and tried not to think about the son who'd betrayed me. But of course I thought about him constantly, about the little boy who'd believed I could fix anything, about the young man who'd drifted away, about the stranger who'd tried to steal my home. Ethan called twice. I didn't answer. He texted several times. "Dad, can we please talk?" And, "I know I messed up, but shutting me out isn't helping." And, "Madison keeps asking why you weren't at her party." That last one stung. He knew exactly which buttons to push, knew how to weaponize my love for my grandchildren, even as he kept them away from me. I went to see the estate planning attorney, a woman named Patricia Chen, no relation to my neighbors, who listened to my story with professional sympathy and immediate action. Within a week I had a new will that explicitly stated my wishes, a living trust to avoid probate, and updated property deeds that made any unauthorized transfer attempts immediately void. "You've protected yourself legally," Patricia told me during our final meeting. "But Mr. Mitchell, I need to ask, have you considered what you actually want to happen with your property after you pass? Because right now, your will leaves everything to Ethan, despite what he tried to do." I'd thought about this constantly. The answer should have been simple. Disinherit him, leave everything to charity, make him pay for his betrayal. But it wasn't simple. He was still my son. Those grandchildren were still my blood. And somewhere, buried beneath layers of disappointment and hurt, I still loved him. "I don't know," I admitted. "Part of me wants to leave him nothing. Part of me still hopes he'll change, that we can fix this. I feel like I'm betraying Eleanor either way. If I cut him off, I'm giving up on our son. If I leave him everything, I'm rewarding his behavior." Patricia nodded understanding. "You don't have to decide today. You can modify your will any time. But I'd suggest this. Create conditions. Leave him the house, but only if certain criteria are met. Require him to write a letter acknowledging his wrongdoing. Mandate that he maintain a relationship with you for at least a year before your death. Give yourself leverage." It was clever, but it felt manipulative. Did I really want my relationship with my son to be based on contractual obligations and inheritance requirements? Was that any better than what he'd tried to do to me? "I'll think about it," I said, and left it at that. Work became my refuge again. Mrs. Patterson's Mustang was running beautifully, and she cried when she picked it up, hugging me and pressing a tin of homemade cookies into my hands. "You're a blessing, Robert," she said. My Harold would have loved knowing someone still cares about his baby. Young Marcus, Derek's nephew, was showing real aptitude for mechanical work. I'd been spending lunch breaks teaching him advanced diagnostics, and he soaked up knowledge like a sponge. "Why are you so good to me?" he asked one afternoon. "I'm just some kid who barely graduated high school." "Because someone was good to me once," I told him, remembering Old Man Thompson taking a chance on a 23-year-old kid with more enthusiasm than skill. "And because natural talent shouldn't be wasted. You've got good hands and a better mind. Don't sell yourself short." He grinned at that, and I felt a small spark of something that might have been purpose. Maybe this was my legacy, not biological children who'd abandoned their values, but young people who I'd helped along the way. The single mothers whose cars I'd fixed affordably. The elderly folks who trusted me to keep them mobile and independent. The neighbors who knew they could count on me. Maybe Ethan was right that I'd never built an empire or accumulated wealth. But I'd built something, just not something he could see or value. It was a Thursday afternoon in mid-August when everything came to a head. I was test driving a repaired SUV, making sure the new suspension system was functioning correctly, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Jessica's name, my daughter-in-law, who never called me, who could barely stand to be in the same room as me. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pull over and pick up. Robert. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're barely holding it together. I need to speak with you, privately, today if possible. About what? Not over the phone. Can you meet me somewhere? The Starbucks on Post Road in an hour. Every instinct screamed this was a trap, but curiosity won out. I'll be there. The Starbucks was crowded with afternoon coffee seekers and laptop workers. I spotted Jessica immediately. Perfect posture, designer handbag, expression of someone attending a funeral. She'd ordered me a black coffee, black as she knew I took it, which was somehow more unsettling than if she'd gotten it wrong. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. No pleasantries, no small talk. Pure efficiency. "What's this about, Jessica?" She looked around, making sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "Ethan doesn't know I'm here. If he finds out, he'll be furious. But I think you deserve to know what's really going on." I waited, my hands wrapped around the coffee cup. "The house situation," she began. "It wasn't Ethan's idea. It was my father's." "Your father told him to forge my signature?" "No, not explicitly. But my father has been pressuring Ethan for years about securing assets, about not letting family sentiment cloud business judgment. He's been telling Ethan that you're a financial liability, that having property tied up with an aging parent who might need expensive medical care or long-term care is irresponsible. So he tried to steal it." Jessica flinched at the word steal. "He tried to secure his inheritance early, which was wrong. I know that. But Robert, you need to understand the pressure Ethan is under. My father expects a certain standard. Our friends expect us to maintain a certain lifestyle. The private school tuition alone is $60,000 a year for both kids. The country club membership, the cars, the house. It all costs more than you can probably imagine. So I should feel sorry for him." "No," she said sharply. "You should understand him. Ethan grew up in a world where money was tight, where you had to worry about bills, where he wore hand-me-downs and couldn't go on school trips because they were too expensive. He swore he'd never put his own children through that, so he works 80-hour weeks trying to prove himself, trying to build something better. And in the process," she trailed off. "In the process, he forgot where he came from, who helped him get there." "Yes." She looked down at her coffee. "The things he said to you on the 4th of July were unforgivable. I told him so that night. We had a huge fight about it. I said he owed you an apology, that you'd sacrificed everything for him, that he was being a spoiled, ungrateful brat." This surprised me. I'd assumed Jessica agreed with everything Ethan said, that they were united in their contempt for me. What did he say? "He said you didn't understand the modern world. That your generation could afford to be sentimental, because a house cost $80,000 and college was $10,000 a year. That you'd never understand the pressure of trying to give your family a good life in an economy where everything costs 10 times more and everyone is competing for the same opportunities. That's not an excuse for treating people like garbage. I know that, and I think deep down he knows it too. But Robert, here's what I really came to tell you. Ethan is in serious trouble." I straightened. "What kind of trouble?" Jessica took a deep breath. "He made some very bad investment decisions, for himself and for several clients. He convinced people to put money into a fund that he thought was a sure thing. It wasn't. He's lost nearly $1 million of other people's money." The number hit me like a physical blow. $1 million? He's been trying to recover it, working connections, making risky plays to earn it back quickly. It's not working. The clients are getting suspicious. His firm is starting to ask questions. If this comes out, he'll lose his job, his license, possibly face legal action. We could lose everything. The house, the club membership, the kids' school, everything he's built. And let me guess, he thought if he had my house, he could borrow against it or sell it to cover his losses. "I don't know what he was thinking," she said, but her eyes told me I was right. "I'm not defending him. What he did to you was wrong. But he's drowning, Robert. He's made terrible mistakes, and he's too proud to ask for help. And I'm watching him sink, and I don't know how to save him." I sat back, processing this. My son, the successful financial consultant, was actually failing. All that arrogance, all that contempt for my modest life, It was a facade covering desperation and bad decisions. Why are you telling me this? Because despite everything, despite how he's treated you, you're still his father. And because, she hesitated, because my children deserve to know their grandfather. I've watched you with them, Robert. The way you look at them with such love, even when they ignore you. The way you always send thoughtful gifts even though they never thank you. The way you still show up to things even when you're clearly not wanted. That's the kind of character I want them to learn from, not the kind they're getting from Ethan right now. Ethan doesn't want them near me. Ethan is wrong about a lot of things, including that. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folder. These are some drawings Madison made in art class. The assignment was to draw their hero. She drew you. I opened the folder with shaking hands. Inside were crayon drawings of a man with gray hair fixing a car, holding a little girl's hand, smiling. In a child's handwriting, "My grandpa is my hero because he fixes things that are broken, and he's always nice." My vision blurred. She never talks to me. Because Ethan tells her you're too busy, that you don't really want to spend time with them, that you're from a different generation that doesn't understand kids. He's been building this wall between you, and I've let him because I didn't want to fight about it. But that was wrong. You deserve to know your grandchildren, and they deserve to know you. I couldn't speak. I just stared at the drawing of myself through my granddaughter's eyes. A hero, even though I'd been called a failure. What do you want from me, Jessica? I want you to forgive him. Not right away, not until he deserves it, but eventually, because he's going to need you, Robert. When everything falls apart, and it's going to fall apart, you're going to be all he has left. And despite everything he's said and done, I think deep down he knows that. He's just too stubborn and too scared to admit it. He tried to steal from me. I know, and that's unforgivable. But you're his father. If you don't forgive him, who will? We sat in silence for a while, the noise of the coffee shop swirling around us. I thought about Ethan as a little boy, how he'd run to me with every problem, believing I could fix anything, how he'd gotten older and stopped running to me, started handling things himself, started believing he didn't need his father's help anymore. And now he was drowning, and his pride wouldn't let him reach for the lifeline, even if I offered it. I can't fix this for him, I said finally, even if I wanted to. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm asking you to be there when it breaks. To be the father you've always been, even when he doesn't deserve it. To show Madison and Chase what real strength looks like. Not money or status, but character. The ability to forgive even when it hurts. That's asking a lot. I know, but you're Robert Mitchell. You've been doing hard things your whole life. She stood up, gathering her purse. I should go before Ethan realizes I'm gone. Think about what I said. I will. She turned to leave, then stopped. Robert, for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For how I've treated you, for the things I've said and the contempt I've shown. You deserved better from me, from all of us. And then she was gone, leaving me with cold coffee and a folder of crayon drawings and the weight of impossible decisions. I drove home in a daze. Everything I thought I understood had shifted again. Ethan wasn't just arrogant, he was desperate. He wasn't just embarrassed by me. He was projecting his own shame onto someone safe to blame. He wasn't just trying to steal my house. He was trying to save himself from consequences he'd built. Did any of that make it better? Did understanding his motivation excuse his behavior? I didn't know. What I did know was that my granddaughter had drawn me as her hero while her father called me a failure. That I'd spent 40 years building a life based on helping people, only to have my own son try to exploit me. That I'd lost Eleanor, and now I was losing Ethan, and I didn't know if I had the strength to fight for him anymore. In my living room, I spread Madison's drawings on the coffee table and stared at them. In her eyes, I was a hero. In Ethan's eyes, I was a failure. Which was true? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Maybe the truth was more complicated than either extreme. My phone rang. Ethan again. This time I answered. Dad, thank God. I've been trying to reach you. I know about the money. Silence. Jessica told you. Yes. Dad, I can explain. No, I interrupted. You can't explain. You can confess. You can apologize. You can face the consequences of your choices. But you can't explain away fraud and bad decisions and treating your father like garbage while you were secretly drowning in debt. It's not debt. It's just a temporary setback. Ethan, stop. Stop lying. Stop spinning. Stop trying to make this sound like anything other than what it is. You made terrible choices. You hurt people. You hurt me. And now you're paying for it. That's called consequences. So you're just going to abandon me when I need you most? Did you think about needing me when you called me a failure? When you tried to steal my house? When you poisoned my grandchildren against me? My voice rose despite my intention to stay calm. You didn't need me then. You were too successful, too evolved, too embarrassed by your working-class father. But now that you're in trouble, now that your fancy life is falling apart, suddenly you need me. Yes, he shouted. Yes, I need you. I'm your son, and I'm in trouble, and I need help. Isn't that what fathers are supposed to do? Help their children? Help, yes. Enable, no. Save you from consequences you brought on yourself? Absolutely not. So what? You're just going to let me lose everything? You're going to lose it anyway, Ethan. The question is what you learn from it. Whether you finally understand that money and status aren't the same as character. Whether you can rebuild yourself into someone I'd actually want to know. This is my life, Dad. My children's future, and you're going to sit back and watch it burn because I hurt your feelings? No, I said quietly. I'm going to sit back and watch you face the consequences of your own actions. Because that's what should have happened a long time ago. Maybe if I'd let you fail more when you were younger, you wouldn't be failing so spectacularly now. I can't believe this. My own father, your own father who you tried to defraud, your own father who you publicly humiliated, your own father who gave you everything and got called a failure for it. That father. Yes, I'm refusing to bail you out. Consider it tough love, or consider it justice, or consider it whatever helps you sleep at night. But I'm done being your safety net while you treat me like garbage. I hung up before he could respond. My hands were shaking, my heart was pounding, but I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks, a sense of power, of agency, of finally taking a stand. The question was whether I could maintain it, or whether I'd crumble the first time Madison asked why Grandpa didn't love her anymore. 3 days later, everything exploded. It started with a phone call from Jessica at 7 in the morning. I was getting ready for work, drinking coffee in my kitchen, when her number lit up my screen. I almost didn't answer. Our last conversation had been exhausting, but something made me pick up. Robert, her voice was barely controlled panic. I need you to come to the house. Now, please. What's wrong? Ethan's firm fired him. The clients are threatening to sue. He's not handling it well. I'm scared, Robert. He's in the garage and he won't come out, and I don't know what to do. My blood ran cold. A man in crisis, alone in a garage. The implications were terrifying. Call 911 if you think he's going to hurt himself. I don't know. He won't answer me. Please, Robert, just come. He needs his father. 20 minutes later, I was pulling into the circular driveway of their house in Westchester, a modern colonial with perfect landscaping and that architectural coldness that came from being designed to impress rather than to live in. Jessica met me at the door, still in her bathrobe, her usually perfect appearance disheveled. He's in there, she pointed toward the 3-car garage. He's been there since yesterday afternoon when they called him into the office. He came home, went straight to the garage and hasn't come out since. He won't respond to me or the kids. Have you gone in? He locked it from the inside. There's a side door, but I'm afraid of what I'll find. I took a deep breath and walked around to the side door. It was locked as she'd said. Ethan, I called out, pounding on the door. Ethan, open up, it's Dad. Silence. Ethan, I swear to God, if you don't open this door right now, I'm breaking it down. More silence. Then finally the sound of a lock turning. The door opened a crack and I saw Ethan's face. Red-eyed, unshaven, looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. What do you want? He said dully. To make sure you're not doing anything stupid. Like what? Like destroying my entire career? Already did that. Like losing everything I worked for? Done. Like proving you right about what a failure I am? Check. He opened the door wider, and I saw the garage, pristine and organized, filled with expensive tools he probably never used. His BMW parked perfectly, and Ethan sitting on an overturned bucket, surrounded by bottles of whiskey, looking like a man who'd lost everything that mattered to him. Can I come in? He shrugged, which I took as permission. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, giving us privacy. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Father and son, mechanic and financial consultant, failure and another failure. So, I said finally, you want to talk about it? What's there to talk about? I made bad investments. I lost my clients' money trying to recover my own losses. The firm found out. They fired me. The clients are suing. I'll probably lose my license, possibly face criminal charges. We'll have to sell the house, pull the kids from school, give up the club membership. Everything Jessica's parents warned her about when she married me, that I came from nothing and would drag her back to nothing. It's all coming true. He took a long drink from a bottle. Congratulations, Dad. You were right. I'm not successful. I'm not evolved. I'm not better than you. I'm worse. Because at least you're honest. You never pretended to be something you weren't. You never destroyed people's lives trying to prove how great you were. You're right, I said. I never did those things. But not because I'm noble. Because I never had the opportunity to fail on such a spectacular scale. You know why? Because I stayed small. I stayed safe. I never took big risks because I was too scared of big failures. Ethan looked up, confusion crossing his face. You think I'm content being a mechanic? You think I never wanted more? I laughed bitterly. Son, when I was your age, I had dreams. I wanted to open my own garage, maybe even a chain of them. I had ideas for improving efficiency, for better customer service, for really building something. But I was too scared. What if I failed? What if I lost everything? So I stayed at Thompson's, collecting my paycheck, playing it safe. And I called that being responsible. I sat down on the garage floor, my back against the BMW. But maybe it was just cowardice. Maybe I shortchanged myself and your mother and you because I was too afraid to reach for more. Maybe you're right that I'm a failure. Not because I didn't succeed, but because I never really tried. That's not... Ethan struggled for words. That's not what I meant. You weren't a failure, Dad. You were stable, reliable. You gave me a good childhood. Did I? Or did I give you just enough to make you hungry for more, without giving you the tools to handle it responsibly when you got it? Stop. Ethan set down the bottle. Stop trying to take responsibility for my mistakes. This isn't on you. This is on me. I got greedy. I got arrogant. I thought I was smarter than everyone else, that the rules didn't apply to me. I thought... He choked on the words. I thought I could have it all, be someone important, never have to worry about money again. And I was willing to do anything to get there, including stealing from my own father. There it was. Finally. The admission I'd been waiting for. Why? I asked simply. Why my house? Because it was easy. Because I told myself you didn't need it, that you'd be fine in a smaller place, that I could use the equity to dig myself out of the hole I'd created. Because it was there, and I was desperate, and I convinced myself it wasn't really stealing since it would have been mine eventually anyway. He looked at me with tears streaming down his face. Because I'm exactly what you said. A man who lost his way, who forgot his values, who turned into someone even I don't recognize. You forgot something else, I said quietly. You forgot that I love you, no matter what, even when you hurt me, even when you betray me, even when you call me a failure and try to steal from me. You're still my son, and I still love you. Ethan broke, completely, utterly broke. He slid off the bucket onto the concrete floor and sobbed like I hadn't seen him sob since he was a child. Deep, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear something out of him with each breath. I moved next to him and put my arm around his shoulders, pulling him close. He collapsed against me, and I held my son while he cried out years of pressure and mistakes and fear and shame. I'm so sorry, Dad. He gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry. For everything. For what I said. For what I tried to do. For being such a disappointment. You're not a disappointment. You made mistakes. Big ones. But you're not a disappointment. How can you say that? After everything I've done. Because I remember who you were. The kid who shared his Halloween candy with the neighborhood kids who couldn't trick or treat. The teenager who tutored struggling classmates for free. The young man who came home from college to help take care of your mother when she was sick. That person is still in there, Ethan. He's just been buried under pressure and fear and bad decisions. What if he's gone? What if I destroyed him? Then we rebuild him. Together. The way we should have been doing all along instead of drifting apart while you tried to prove you didn't need me. Ethan pulled back, wiping at his eyes. Why aren't you angrier? Why aren't you yelling at me, telling me I deserve this? Because you already know that. And because anger won't help either of us right now. What will help is figuring out how you're going to face this, make it right, and move forward. There is no moving forward. I'm going to lose my license. Probably face criminal charges. We'll lose everything. Okay. So you lose things. You still have Jessica. You still have your kids. You still have your health, your mind, your ability to work. You still have options, even if they're not the options you wanted. Like what? Becoming a mechanic? He said it without malice, just exhaustion and bitter irony. Maybe, if that's what it takes. There's no shame in honest work, Ethan. I tried to teach you that. You forgot it somewhere along the way, but that doesn't mean you can't remember it now. We sat there on the garage floor for a long time, not speaking, just existing in the same space. Father and son. Two men who'd failed in different ways, trying to find a path forward. Finally, Ethan spoke. What do I do, Dad? How do I fix this? You start by facing it head on. You talk to a lawyer about the legal issues. You talk to your clients, apologize, work out payment plans if you can. You're honest with Jessica about the full extent of the damage. You explain to your kids, in age-appropriate ways, that Daddy made mistakes and is going to make them right. And you stop running, stop hiding, stop trying to manage the narrative, just face it. I don't know if I can. You can. Because you're my son, and whatever else you inherited from me, you got stubbornness and the ability to take a punch and keep going. You just forgot that for a while. Ethan nodded slowly. I need to apologize to you. Really apologize. Not just words, but actions. I need to make this right. We'll get there. But first, you need to take care of your immediate problems. Come on. I stood up, my knees protesting, and offered him my hand. Let's go inside, let Jessica know you're okay, and start making a plan. He took my hand, and I pulled him to his feet. We walked back to the house together, and Jessica nearly collapsed with relief when she saw us. He's okay, I told her. We're going to figure this out. She hugged Ethan fiercely, then surprised me by hugging me too. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for being here. The next few hours were a blur of difficult conversations. Ethan called his lawyer, started the process of dealing with the lawsuits and potential criminal charges. He called the clients he'd wronged and apologized, offering to work out repayment plans, even though it would take years. He sat down with Madison and Chase and explained, in simple terms, that Daddy had made mistakes at work and they'd need to make some changes as a family. Madison, surprisingly, took it in stride. It's okay, Daddy, she said with the uncomplicated love of a child. Grandpa says everyone makes mistakes. He'll help you fix it. Chase was more confused, asking questions about whether they'd still have their house and their toys. Jessica handled it with more grace than I'd expected, reassuring them while being honest that things would be different for a while. Through it all, I stayed, not saying much, just being present, being the father Ethan had forgotten he needed. As evening fell and the kids were sent to bed, Ethan, Jessica, and I sat at their kitchen table, a massive marble-topped thing that probably cost more than my truck, and talked about the future. We'll have to sell the house, Jessica said quietly. The mortgage is too high for one income, and even if I go back to work full-time, we can't maintain this lifestyle. The kids will have to change schools, Ethan added. We can't afford private school anymore. We'll have to give up the club membership, the vacation home, probably the cars too. They listed their losses like wounds being inventoried, each one painful but survivable. I listened and thought about how different this was from the conversations Eleanor and I had when we were young. We'd talked about what we could afford, not what we had to give up. We'd built slowly, carefully, never overextending. It had seemed limiting at the time, but now I saw the wisdom in it. Where will you go? I asked. They looked at each other. I don't know, Ethan admitted. Somewhere cheaper. Maybe Connecticut, closer to my old roots. Ironically. I took a deep breath. Here it was. The moment where I could be petty, could let him struggle, could watch him lose everything as payback for what he'd tried to do to me. Or I could be the father Eleanor raised me to be. My house has 3 bedrooms, I said. 2 upstairs, 1 down. The kids could share the bigger room. You and Jessica could take Ethan's old room, and I'd stay in the master. It's not fancy, but it's paid off. It's stable, and it's home. They stared at me in shock. Dad, we can't, Ethan started. Yes, you can, if you want to. I'm not saying forever. But while you get back on your feet, while you deal with the legal issues and figure out what's next, you need a place to live. The house is big enough. It'll be tight, but we'll manage. After what I did to you, Ethan's voice cracked. After I tried to steal it from you? Yes, because that's what family does. Not the fake family where everyone pretends to be perfect. Real family. where people mess up and hurt each other and have to find ways to forgive and move forward. You think you're the first person to disappoint me? You think I haven't disappointed myself 1,000 times? The difference is whether we let that define us or whether we use it to grow. Jessica was crying now. Robert, that's incredibly generous, but we couldn't impose. It's not an imposition. It's an opportunity. For me to know my grandchildren. For Ethan to remember where he came from. For all of us to figure out what family actually means. If you want it, it's yours. Temporarily. With conditions. What conditions? Ethan asked warily. 1. You be honest. With me, with Jessica, with yourself. No more lying, no more hiding, no more pretending. 2. You respect my home and my rules. It's not a hotel, it's not a crash pad. It's the place where your mother and I built our lives. You treat it with respect. 3. You let me be a grandfather. Real time with Madison and Chase, not supervised visits where you're checking your watch. They're going to live with me. I'm going to know them. And 4, Jessica prompted. 4, you forgive yourself eventually. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. Because holding on to shame doesn't help anyone. Learn from this. Grow from it. But don't let it destroy you. Deal? Ethan stood up and walked around the table. Then he did something he hadn't done in years. He hugged me. Really hugged me, the way he had when he was young and believed his father could fix anything. Deal, he whispered. Thank you, Dad. Thank you for not giving up on me. Never, I said. Not even when you wanted me to. Over the next 2 weeks, everything changed. Ethan's legal situation was serious, but not catastrophic. With restitution and cooperation, he'd likely avoid jail time but would lose his license and face years of debt. The house went on the market. The furniture was sold or put in storage. And slowly, painfully, they dismantled the life they'd built. Madison and Chase took it better than expected. Kids are resilient that way. Madison was actually excited about moving to Grandpa's house, about having a real neighborhood instead of a gated community. Chase was thrilled about the big maple tree in the front yard, perfect for climbing. Jessica found work at a smaller firm, taking a pay cut but maintaining her career. Ethan started looking for work, any work, and was hired by a local nonprofit that helped low-income families with financial planning. The irony wasn't lost on any of us, but he threw himself into it with an intensity I hadn't seen in years, and slowly, carefully, we became a family again. Not the family we'd been, and certainly not the family Ethan had tried to build, but something new, something more honest. It was a Saturday morning in early September when the final piece fell into place. I was in the garage with Chase, teaching him about basic car maintenance, when Ethan appeared in the doorway. Dad, can we talk? I handed Chase a clean rag and sent him inside to wash up. Then I turned to my son. What's on your mind? I never properly apologized. For everything. The 4th of July, the forged documents, all of it. I was drowning, and instead of asking for help, I lashed out at the one person who'd always been there for me. I called you a failure when you're the most successful person I know. Not in money, but in character, in integrity, in being there for people no matter what. Ethan, let me finish. Please. He took a deep breath. I look at you now, at this life you built, and I realize what I couldn't see before. You're not a failure. You're successful in all the ways that actually matter. You have friends who respect you, neighbors who trust you, grandchildren who adore you, a community that values you, and you sleep well at night because you've never betrayed your principles for a bigger paycheck or a fancier title. He pulled something from his pocket, a folded piece of paper. I wrote this. It's not much, but I wanted you to have it. I unfolded the paper, in Ethan's handwriting, to my father. I called you a failure. I was wrong. You gave me everything that mattered and nothing that didn't. You taught me right from wrong, even when I chose to forget it. You showed me what love looks like when it's tested, when it's hard, when it requires sacrifice. You never gave up on me, even when I gave you every reason to. I'm sorry. For the words, for the actions, for the years I wasted being ashamed of the best man I've ever known. I'm sorry for trying to take from you instead of learning from you. I'm sorry for measuring success in dollars instead of character. Thank you for being my father. Thank you for letting me come home. Thank you for showing my children what a real hero looks like. Your son, Ethan. I read it twice, my vision blurring. Then I looked at Ethan and saw not the arrogant consultant or the desperate fraud, but my son, the boy who'd believed I could fix anything. the man who was learning he could fix things too. "Come here," I said, and pulled him into a hug. We stood there in my garage, surrounded by tools and memories, father and son, mechanic and former executive, two imperfect men trying to do better. "I love you, Dad," he said. "I don't say it enough, but I do." "I know. I love you too. Always have, always will." When we finally pulled apart, I saw Madison watching from the doorway, her ever-present iPad forgotten. "Are you and Daddy okay now, Grandpa?" "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "We're okay." She ran over and hugged both of us, and Chase joined in, and suddenly it was a pile of Mitchells in a garage in Connecticut, laughing and crying and holding each other. That evening, after dinner around my kitchen table, all of us squeezed in, elbows bumping, passing dishes and sharing stories. I took Eleanor's photo from the mantel and sat on the porch. The September air was cool, the maple tree rustling in the breeze, the neighborhood quiet and peaceful. "We did it, Ellie," I whispered to her image. "We didn't lose him. He found his way back." I looked at the house, my modest, ordinary, perfect house, filled now with laughter and life and second chances. Through the window I could see Ethan helping Madison with homework, Jessica loading the dishwasher, Chase playing with a toy on the floor. This was success. Not the 6-bedroom house in Westchester, or the country club membership, or the 6-figure salary. This was what mattered. Family, forgiveness, connection, love that survived even when tested to its limits. "What you do with love," I said to Eleanor's photo, remembering the promise I'd made to her as she lay dying. "Nobody can erase. Not time, not distance, not mistakes. Love endures." And in that moment, sitting on my porch in my working-class neighborhood, I felt like the richest man in the world. Not because of what I had accumulated, but because of what I'd never lost. My integrity, my values, my ability to love even when it hurt, my willingness to give second chances even when they weren't earned. Ethan had called me a failure. He'd been wrong, but I'd also learned something important. Success isn't about never failing. It's about what you do after failure, how you pick yourself up, how you help others do the same, how you turn mistakes into lessons and pain into growth. My son had failed spectacularly, and in failing, he'd finally learned what I'd been trying to teach him his whole life, that the measure of a man isn't his bank account or his job title or his zip code. It's his character, his integrity, his willingness to face his mistakes and make them right. As the sun set over Connecticut, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, I sat on my porch and felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Not the peace of someone whose life was perfect, but the peace of someone whose life was real. Messy, complicated, imperfect, and absolutely real. And in the end, that was the greatest success of all. Sometimes the people we love most hurt us deepest. Sometimes the life we're ashamed of is the life worth fighting for. And sometimes the greatest gift we can give is not wealth or status, but simply showing up, holding on, and refusing to give up, even when giving up would be easier, justified, and completely understandable. This is the story of a mechanic, a house, and a father's love that couldn't be stolen, forged, or forgotten. This is the story of what really matters.